Father Calabasas stopped at Dunkin' Donuts before going to St. Mary's Church of Lynn that morning. He was a Catholic priest, but he had a sweet tooth, or, as he said to the barista that morning, "Oh, pardon my sweet fang, but I might have an extra squirt of that caramel syrup in my coffee this morning." Sweet fang was a slip that the baristas didn't care about because it was Lynn, Massachusetts, 5-something in the morning, and English was not their first language. Nobody knew if Father Calabasas was a Nordic kind of pale, Swiss, or a Swedish kind of pale, but he seemed to hail from some country where paleness is a quality of the majority populace. Nobody knew if his accent was German or Transylvanian, but it was something similar. Some accents sound all the same to Americans, but the Dunkin' coffee on his breath was proof of his becoming a part of Lynn. He carried his cold brew down the aisle of St. Mary's. It was so gray outside the church that he felt he had woken up before God did. Tap, tap, tap went his shoes, working their echolocation to the altar, where he bowed and veered left to enter his office. He lit a candle at his desk. He liked candles more than using the electric lights. He sipped his coffee while reading from a book on theology and waiting for the sun to rise. His office was something akin to a captain's quarters to him. It was decked out with shelves of books on theology and world history and decorated with religious relics, certificates, and photos of him and his fellow priests. There was a picture of him and his grandmother back home who had lived to be 107. There was a picture of him and a drug addict, a 20-something-year-old girl who he had helped on a spiritual journey of sorts. He made phone calls to her every couple of weeks and checked in, and she was doing well. There was a photo of him at a baptism for quadruplets. He looked delighted in all of these photographs, but his pale and gaunt draconian features betrayed him. Physically speaking, he was a paradox because he simply looked too ghoulish to be a priest. He sat down at his desk because he wanted to get some reading done before the 7:30 Mass. A thud made him turn his eyes away from the text and towards the ceiling. "Hark the herald pigeons sing," he said to himself. He blessed what he thought were pigeons with a chuckle. He delighted everything that lived, and he liked finding different aspects about different creatures to delight in. He appreciated how some pigeons cooed despite how humanity discarded them. He always decided to give them greeting glances when he happened upon them in the parking lot outside of St. Mary's. He liked the pigeons cooing, and in turn, he liked the seagulls' perseverance. When he found a spider descending from the ceiling of his office one afternoon, he cupped it in his hands and carried it outside. "Don't let the pigeons make a meal of you, little friend," he told the spider, then let it down into the turf of the grass along the sidewalk. And how did he treat the ultimate creature? The one that cooed like pigeons when it prayed. The one that found a reason to preserve. The one whose heart sometimes seemed to be dangling above the precipice of hell by one cobwebby string. He treated his fellow man kindly, whether he saw him in church or not. A louder thud came. "Huh," Father Calabasas said, looking up from his text again. "That's one big person." He looked back down at his desk with his eyes treating his Dunkin' cold brew the same way they had treated a mystery potion. There came another thud that made the priest raise his eyebrows. Then there came a great creaking from above that made the rest of the church shiver. Father Calabasas stood up. He looked up at the ceiling, and his voice was quite the injury in his eyes. But the boards of the ceiling seemed sworn to a new secrecy, or had they been so frightened that they had lost their tongue? He maneuvered around his desk while keeping his eyes up on the ceiling the whole time. He wandered out of his office and out into the main body of the church. It was still empty, but less gray, for precursory sunlight was touching the stained glass windows and just shyly lighting the church's interior. He shuffled down the aisle with his head back and his eyes up. The roof sounded like the groaning hull of a ship. It was so great that Father Calabasas quickened his pace to the exit of the church because he thought the roof might collapse in on him. He was letting out a "what?" when the sound of a giant bell creaked open this morning. It seemed that the bell's signal echoed within the shell of the atmosphere. Father Calabasas hurried out and down the marble steps at the front of the church, while the bell's signal droned lower and lower until its sound finally ceased. He appeared utterly baffled. He shimmied into the empty parking lot while the employers of the bank across the street filed out to find the source of the ringing. Again, a bell boomed out in the morning, but the thing was that St. Mary's bells were retired. They hadn't been rung for decades, not since the 70s at least. As far as anyone knew, only seagulls frequented the bell tower at the top of St. Mary's, nesting and leaving white droppings, but never ringing the giant bells. It rang again before the second sound could settle down. Father Calabasas could just make out the startled chatter of the bank employees across the street, until their voices drowned inside the metallic roaring of the bell. He spun around in the parking lot and looked up. He gasped. There on the gable at the bell tower was the silhouette of somebody, tall, muscular, hairy, a hominid of some sort. Its arms were lanky and long enough to reach into the bell tower. Because of the sun's triumphant rising, however, whatever stood on St. Mary's roof was only visible as a silhouette. Father Calabasas' gasp mimicked the bell and continued on until it echoed out of existence. The silhouette was black as ink in front of the creamy orange-yellow morning light. Why, the thing was blocking out the sun itself. The bank employees started screaming across the street as the thing on St. Mary's roof rang the bell again with a janky but mechanical jerk of its arms. The screaming of the crowd across the street below must have agitated the black mass atop St. Mary's roof, for it started ringing the bell in greater succession. It jerked its arms back and forth more quickly, and now the great bell set all the little bells within the bell tower to panic. Father Calabasa would have sworn he heard the thing hooting underneath the agitation of the bells, but before he could zero in his ear on the barely audible hooting, the sounds of sirens scared the thing away. It left while the bells radiated their metallic echo into Lynn. He kept his face in a gasping expression while watching the thing slide down the roof and disappear behind the church. He noticed how tawny the thing was with hair, like bristles on a ruined paintbrush. It was covered in hair. This was the last thing he noticed about it, though. Father Calabasas took a step deeper into the parking lot. Oh, how the black mass had disturbed his pigeons. He needed to go and chase it until he remembered the crowd of people across the street. He turned around before he could continue deeper into the parking lot, and he saw how the people huddled together. Even the bank security guard had an unsettled expression on his face, while the women clung to him. The bells had ceased to echo when Father Calabasas crossed the street. He put his hands out and levered his arms down in a calming motion, like a conductor quieting the band. "It's all right, everybody. The thing has ended. The thing has ended." "What was that thing, Father?" asked the security guard in a thick Bostonian accent. How strange it was to hear a Bostonian conveying fear. "Well, it was quite big," Father Calabasas said, sounding sarcastic. "I think we can all come to an agreement on that." "Oh, "Somebody has to catch it," the old bank receptionist squealed. "Christ, Father, what the hell was it doing up there ringing the bell?" the security guard asked. His face was red and seemed about to pop with sweat. A police car pulled up and parked on the curb of the sidewalk outside St. Mary's. The cop hopped out of the car and stood beside Father Calabasas, making the two of them immediate partners. "It was a man," the old bank receptionist shrieked at the police officer. But before the officer could inquire further, the security guard blurted out, "I wasn't no man, hell no. I saw that thing, officer." "Thing?" the officer inquired. "Bastard must have been 10 freaking feet tall," the security man complained. "I saw it, officer." All the employees cowered. They took turns looking up at the bell tower in front of the yellow morning sky before looking back into the huddled horde they had formed. What a sour hollandaise sauce was that sky. The police officer turned his attention to the calmest member of the bunch. Father Calabasas widened his eyes when he saw a call for responsibility in the officer's eyes. The priest cocked and tilted his head as if his skull was a bingo machine, rotating to the winning number. "I guess you saw it too, Father?" the policeman asked. "Just a shadowy version of the thing, Your Honor," Father Calabasas said, matter-of-factly, "and it was quite hairy, and tall, like he said." "These crackheads are evolving," the police officer said, while shaking his own head. "Oh, no, sir," Father Calabasas said, hunching towards the police officer and speaking in a low voice. "See, I've assisted in the rehabilitation of a few of 'em crackheads in my day, and you see, well, I don't think any of them got so hairy and tall because of their habitual bane." "Well then, how do you explain this, Father?" the police officer asked in a low voice. "Oh my God," the old bank receptionist shrieked. "It was a giant monkey." "Was it, Father?" the police officer inquired. "It was monkey-like, Your Honor," Father Calabasas said, after a moment's hesitation, but he didn't sound quite sure. "You guys might want to keep an eye on the police logs tomorrow," the officer chuckled. "I'm gonna take down everybody's statement. I'm sure I'll be able to find you inside. Eh, Father?" "Yes, I'll have a rendezvous with a bygone cold brew in there," the priest prophesied. The conversation that the priest and the police officer had was inconclusive. They conversed in his office, and the inquiry only seemed to cement the situation into a more bizarre molding, for the police officer believed the priest the most amongst all the other witnesses. Father Calabasas went into detail how he had heard the thud and heard the ceiling cracking before he hurried out to see the thing ringing St. Mary's bells. He left out the detail of the thing hooting, because he still wasn't completely sure of it. "By the way, Father," the police officer said, shaking the priest's hand, "you called the judge Your Honor, although I don't think you'll ever be seeing one." "What do I call you?" "Tommy, sergeant, officer, your fellow man," the police officer said with a twinkle in his eye. "I'll get out of your hair. As I understand, you've got mass soon." "I'd rather you in my hair than a giant monkey thing," Father Calabasas joked. The two chuckled, and the police officer left, leaving the priest alone in his office with an empty Dunkin' Donuts cup on his desk. Coincidentally, the bells began to ring when he hung up the phone. How politely did the priest treat the nuisance? He didn't even bother to go outside and try to see the thing, for it was the same time as was the other day when the same thing had happened. He knew what it was, but he didn't know why it was so attracted to the St. Mary's Church, to his church. The rest of the day carried on as normal, but an escalation occurred the following Monday morning when Father Calabasas was waiting for the barista to make his cold brew. There was a television in the corner of the room playing the news. Authorities are still investigating the bizarre incident, but still no one can explain what creature was on the security footage of the grocery store," the news anchor said while the footage cut to the footage of a grocery store aisle. It showed shoppers hurrying away from a hominid with orange hair, twice the size of the fleeting shoppers, as it ransacked the shelves of food. Because the footage was from above, only the head and shoulders of the creature were visible, and its visage was covered in orange hair, but its fingers were somewhere between purple and black. They were very long, thick fingers. 3 Stop & Shop employees have quit following the incident, and Stop & Shop has made an official comment about the situation, saying, "We here at Stop & Shop appreciate our customers of all different shapes and sizes, but do not condone this kind of behavior. We apologize for the disruption at our Lynn location on Washington Street the other day," the news anchor reported. This coming mere hours after another bizarre incident at St. Mary's, where the thing was reportedly sighted ringing the church bells before fleeing. "Get yourself on the nearest Mayflower and come up here," Father Calabasas said into the landline phone in his office that morning. Dr. Milton Kellogg arrived the following Wednesday afternoon, carrying his bags and suitcases into St. Mary's, which then smelled like the cardboard-tasting communion wafers and candles. Father Calabasas was in his mass attire, a white robe with a green stripe down the center, when the doctor hurried up the aisle. "I came as soon as I could," Milton croaked. He had a nasally voice that so desperately wanted to be British. "But I didn't come all this way for you to try to convert me," he said, when coming to a stop before the altar. Father Calabasas' face became lit with amusement. He seemed to be waiting for the opportune moment to laugh. "Old friend Milton, how are the alligators?" "Business is booming," Milton said, despite the disinterest in his voice. "The Dionyska skull is a real draw for the little children. Just as long as you keep them away from the real hungry living alligators," Father Calabasas teased. "Oh, have you seen the movie Lake Placid?" "Yes, I did, Tobias, and in my opinion, it's ridiculous." "I hope we have time to go and see a less ridiculous movie when this whole thing is over," Father Calabasas mused. He still seemed very amused. Milton squinted behind his glasses. His acquaintance's amusement always perplexed him. "This whole thing, your request was quite urgent, Tobias. I wish you had done some explaining over the phone. Perhaps I thought you wouldn't have come. You must instill some better belief in me, Tobias," Milton sighed. Even his sigh was disinterested. "Well, why don't we start with what you saw?" Father Calabasas went on to describe the events of the bell ringing. Milton opened up his laptop, and Father Calabasas directed him to the footage of the thing in the grocery store. "I don't believe it," Milton said, in a kind of elongated gasp. "Well, you better believe it, my friend." "No, I don't believe it," Milton said, while stroking a non-existent beard. "It seems to be a Gigantopithecus blackie." "Uh-huh, and what is that?" "An ancient species of primate that went extinct in Asia 200 years ago, give or take," Milton said. He lifted a pointed finger and started tracing his equations in the air in front of the laptop screen. "The aspects are unmistakable. Its size and orange hair. It's a distant relative of the orangutan, but it's supposed to be an ancient relative, not living, you see. I've seen it ringing my church bells. What did you call it again?" "Gigantopithecus," Milton answered breathlessly. "It was supposed to have died around the time that humans were leaving Africa." The both of them went silent, remembering their previous conversation and friendly debates. The silence was agreeable because both subconsciously knew that today was probably not the appropriate day for a friendly debate. Besides, either one already knew that they couldn't sway the other with their opinions. Finally, Father Calabasas broke the silence. "Some things come back from the dead, Milton." Another silence came while they rewatched the footage of the grocery store. "Are there any zoos around?" Milton asked. "The Stone Zoo, but This is far away, and they do not have any orangutans or anything of the sort. Could it be a new species? No, it's Gigantopithecus, all right, Milton mused. What makes you so sure? Because you called me for help, Tobias. The utterance of his first name made Father Calabasas flinch, but he remained composed. But can you riddle me this, Dr. Kellogg? Father Calabasas waved his fingers while beginning to pace in the area between the pews and the altar. So, what if it is a Gigantopithecus? Well, that's a mystery in of itself, but why did the creature, not once, but twice, ring the bells of my church? The bells of which no one in Lynn are old enough to remember ever hearing. Well, I'd say monkey see, monkey do, but you say those bells haven't been rung in years. Decades, Father Calabasas hissed. Pongo Pygmatheus, that's orangutan to you, have been recorded quite comically, driving golf carts, using saws, and doing very human things, Milton explained, although there was an air of uncertainty in his voice. Oh, Milton, if you saw how urgently this thing rang the bells, Father Calabasas explained. What are you suggesting, Tobias? That this thing, this Gigantopithecus, was doing more than monkey see, monkey do, Father Calabasas explained. I theorized that this was an act of desperate spiritualism, a monkey in search of God. Milton was so enamored by the priest's monologue that he was fearful of the church organ coming to life in a melodramatic song, but it didn't, so he listened and hoped that no church music would begin playing. Father Calabasas went on. You're of the party that believes humanity springs from the apes, right? Yes, Milton said, a little amused, but Gigantopithecus is not an ancestor of mankind. He is man-like, Father Calabasas shrugged. He made shrugging appear so much like a move in a musical. When in your books did ancient man develop religion, or did we search for it? Is this Gigantopithecus ringing the forgotten bell to, shall we say, see if God responds to him? Shall we say, to summon God? Does it want to learn? Tobias, you are thinking fantastically. Why, of all things, Milton, would the Gigantopithecus come to my church and ring the bell? Father Calabasas emphasized, and although Milton was a staunch atheist, it made him go silent. I'm going to ask you a question that I fear to ask, but I must ask. Is the Gigantopithecus dangerous? A 10-foot-tall primate, Milton sighed. Generally, orangutans are not aggressive towards humans, but those are orangutans. Little is known about Gigantopithecus. Put one in the modern-day civilization with cars and traffic and pedestrians out for walks, children playing on playgrounds, children playing outside during recess. We might not desire experimenting with waiting just to see how Gigantopithecus behaves with modern man. Father Calabasas thought of screaming bank employees. He thought of how the shoppers in the grocery store fled. I mean, Gigantopithecus has the teeth of the gentlest herbivore, but again, primates have been known to become territorial. Is my church in danger? If this thing returns and causes a panic during Mass, there's no telling how it would react to human panic, Milton answered. The two became silent again. It would have been a good time for the church organ to come to life and provide some kind of daunting melody, for they didn't want to fill the silence with more theories, or worse, fill it with predictions. What do we do, Milton? We find it, we learn about it. And what do we do if it comes back at the wrong time? Father Calabasas said, rephrasing his question and making it sound dire. How do I protect my flock? Do you mean firepower, Tobias? You know guns aren't allowed in church, Milton teased. He didn't smile, though. How long do you plan on staying in Massachusetts, Doctor? Father Calabasas asked, after deliberating in himself and his mind. Now, Milton began, I plan on staying a lot longer than I initially planned. You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.